Yo guys, I've got a spark which I'm going to use to ignite the fire for a brand new Film Fridays video here on the channel. So this is going to be for my Film of the Month in January of 2023, mind you, and please bear in mind that when I make these Film of the Month type videos, the release dates are based on the UK release dates, so a lot of films are released much earlier in the US than what they are in the UK, and since I live here in the UK, I don't actually see these films until their initial release in this country, mind you. Hence why I can't really talk about these films until they come out, and in this case, these films, some of which came out last year in America, didn't release here in the UK until January even of 2023, which is why they're included towards this video, mind you. Now when it comes to films I actually saw in January of 2023, there were 5 that I watched: Tar, Unwelcome, Fabelmans, Babylon, and Megan. So that's 5 films to talk about in this brief intro right here. I say brief whilst we're already 60 seconds in, mind you. But films I missed was stuff like Empire of Light, which I didn't even see a trailer for that, let alone the whole film, so I have no idea what I'm missing out with on that one. And from the 5 films I just listed, I can tell you right off the bat that Unwelcome and Babylon aren't even close to being within the running, mind you. Babylon is just a little bit too long. It definitely needed at least half an hour cutting out of the film, but the performances were spectacular. What do you expect from Brad Pitt and Margot Robbie, mind you? And also, being a filmmaker myself, having that film made around filmmaking is pretty spectacular, and I quite enjoyed it for moments. Like I say, the pacing was all over the place, structurally the film was all over the place, the writing was inconsistent within scenes, and the characters were just so incredibly unlikable. It's one thing to make your protagonists unlikable, that's fine. They've got to grow and go through a character arc. None of our characters really did. And because you wind up hating their guts, what happens to them in the end just doesn't really afflict you. You don't care about it. So ultimately, Babylon is just a film that's slow, too much crude humour. It has 30 minutes at least that need to be taken out of it, but it still had some great acting work, some great cinematography, so that's why I still enjoyed Babylon to a certain extent. And I can say similar stuff about Unwelcome, like the cinematography was great, but it was an independent British film set in Ireland, so that alone I kind of can connect to, because that's the sort of filmmaking I will be hopefully getting into in the next several years or so. Have to wait and see, but Unwelcome was a very strange film. The ending was very jarring and came really out of left field. It was where the director really got to showcase his style, so the fact that they left all of the directorial interests and surprises until the very end and the rest of the film was quite generic didn't really help it. But it is starring 2 characters who wind up in a house where there's evil leprechauns. Very Irish, might I say. But the film does a great job in making you immediately emotionally connect to these characters. The hook is that they're starting a family, the wife is pregnant, so it pulls off every generic trick in the book to get you to immediately care about this family, and then it tackles the themes of home invasion very well, and the aftermath of an assault. So those are really dark themes that get the blood pumping. It's really strong emotionally and poignant. It's very memorable that way. In fact, the first 5 minutes actually had my heart almost stop a couple of times because of just the fear and the dread and the build up to this assault, mind you. In fact, the film probably would have been better without the leprechauns entirely. They felt like an unnecessary subplot, but that's why those 2 films aren't even close to the line, because by comparison, Megan, Fabelmans and Tar are so much better. Megan is, of course, a film where you look at it and just think, can we please, for the love of all that is good in this world, stop developing upon these AIs that can rise up and kill us all? Why do we want this? We don't need this. It's literally turning a toy into effectively a parent, and that's mainly where the flaws for our main protagonist come in. You know, she's kind of distant and doesn't know how to raise a daughter, obviously, because she doesn't have a daughter of her own, but that dynamic there, and the way how it constantly shifts, and just the added horror and dread of this AI, is all very well captured. It's got really nice themes, because at its heart it's about this story of an aunt and her niece connecting. So it's definitely very well made, which is why it's one in the running, as is Tar, because the performances in that were spectacular. The film is incredibly slow, which is pretty much my only flaw with it, because like I say, the acting is spectacular, the cinematography and the sound as well are spectacular. You just get these really wide, awesome shots with the entire orchestra, and just for Descent into Madness, for Cate Blanchett's main character throughout all of this, it is so compelling. You just watch her get crazy and crazier in each scene, and the developments, they make sense too. And it's very mysterious, like it's not explicitly stated what is fact and what is fiction in this film, so that alone, you're left to unwind the mystery yourself, and you're left leaving the theatre thinking different of these characters as you did going into the film. And that's what makes it such compelling character writing, and it is honestly a very, very good film, worth checking out. And it's all about a very niche area. It's got lots of long takes of interviews and just characters speaking, and that alone is compelling drama to me. So a film worth checking out, like I said earlier, but not my film of the month, because instead, as you can tell from the title already, my film of the month was for Fabelmans, and I can't wait to get into real great depth about this film. I'm going to review it with some Plague Tale Innocence gameplay in the background, rather than simply just my voice in a poster of the film. So without further ado, let's roll the intro and then get straight into the review at hand for January 2023's Film of the Month. Tar was actually very close to taking the Film of the Month title for January, but as soon as I watched for Fabelmans, it took all of 5 minutes before I got so emotionally hooked that I realised this film would definitely be taking the title of my January Film of the Month for 2023. But still, those two films were very close, effectively neck and neck, and either of them could have taken home this prestigious title. But as for the Fabelmans though, this film at its heart is a relatively simple story about young Sammy Fabelman longing to become a filmmaker, and the mannerisms in which this dream affects his behaviour and the relationship he has with his family. Being an aspiring filmmaker myself, every beat of the plot resonated with me. The film covers the themes of how filmmaking will tear up your heart. It's an incredibly difficult business to get a job in. Even myself, who studied filmmaking now for almost 4 years, will come out of university with no guarantee of getting a job, and even if I do, it won't necessarily be the job I'm looking for. It's not like other industries where you can be objectively marked and graded and then instantly go into that field of study straight after school. Filmmaking consumes your life. It demands all elements of yourself, leaving little area for other things, particularly for other people in your life. This can shatter your relationships, and the film's greatest strength is showcasing the power filmmaking can have in influencing your relationships, and those themes are mainly explored through the characters that have layers and depth, surprisingly vigour for a film under 3 hours long. The story does have some very slow moments which bring the pace into a crawl, but for a film of this style, it's important that you really connect with these characters, otherwise the emotional beats will not hit as hard, and I myself wish the film was slow more often, since I grew to really care for these characters, and I wanted those slow moments so badly so I could just really watch and absorb their lifestyle and their relationships with one another. It's just something I could really resonate with the slower the film went. So for me, in this particular film, because it was so perfectly executed, slow meant good. This film will be difficult to invest into for anyone who doesn't understand the film industry or could care less about art in general. This creates an audience for the film and alienates everyone outside that audience. That is really the only flaw I have with the film, since I fall into the audience that the film is targeting, so I can say in great confidence that the film's purpose is fulfilled upon perfectly, as it's the perfect film for what it's trying to be and for who it's targeting. A film with this much self-awareness and ability to fulfill upon said purpose this successfully demands to be critically rewarded. The best part to this film is the directorial style. Every element to this script and this production feels personal. For Pete's sake, before the film began, Steven Spielberg himself addresses the audience and thanks them for coming out to see the film in a cinema, a communal area where the film experience is exemplified. It's no wonder why every frame feels personal. Only Spielberg could have directed this film, as it's a shadow of his life. Sammy Fabelman is simply his avatar, And knowing all this adds to just how personal the film is, and I commend Spielberg for striving a balance between honouring the art of filmmaking and honouring his own family in a manner which is poignant and memorable. I found myself crying multiple times throughout the film, and I'm not afraid to say it, because characters in this film experience extremely personal loss, such as the loss of the grandmother, and it truly rips your heart out. These moments where the characters are vulnerable because you've grown to care for them, seeing them this way is what makes it so extremely upsetting. I just absolutely adore the character writing. Sammy Fabelman in particular is a very flawed character, as filmmaking is a rather selfish hobby, and Jude Hirsch's character is only in the film for a short time, but his performance really sticks with you and it lingers because he lost his family in pursuit of art, and he calls out the importance of Sammy's filmmaking, seeing how there is little room for family in your heart when so much of it is already consumed by the art of film. He feels as though filmmaking is more important to Sammy than his own family. Since these two loves aren't compatible, the need for them both is what tears you up from the inside out, and Sammy's denial of this speaks volumes to his character, because even though he denies it, the performance of Gabriel LaBelle is so strong that you can see within his eyes that he doesn't truly deny this, and he's internally conflicted throughout the entire film. These characters feel so organic and human because they act and speak as humans do. Sammy's selfishness throughout the film is constantly called out by other characters, forcing him to reevaluate his decisions. Sammy's father is a very technical man. He knows about computers and moving parts, and this logistical mindset questions his son's dedication to film. He sees filmmaking as nothing other than a hobby and not something he can make a professional living from, but obviously Sammy doesn't see it this way, and they are conflicted over it. This logical look at the world isn't something unheard of. Even films targeted at more universal audiences, like Mitchell's First for the Machines, cover this idea of traditional guaranteed job roles versus passion projects that may never see the light of day. Seeing your child have a hobby which keeps them engaged and happy as a parent is an incredible sight to behold. You're happy for that child, but then that child grows up and becomes a teenager, like what Sammy is throughout the majority of the film, and that's when you want them to start putting the hobby aside in favour of responsibility. And when that doesn't happen and you don't understand that hobby the same as your child does, that's naturally when the organic conflict comes in, and it's really compelling character writing to be interwoven into this script in just such a natural manner. The actors truly sell you on these characters. Sammy, during the editing of some of his films, stumbles upon a family secret. Knowing this weighs down on him heavily, and it makes him see his mother in a completely different light. Seeing that relationship shattered and their dedication toward one another on their quests to fix it is extremely powerful. When I said earlier that I cried multiple times throughout the film, this was both at the emotional heights of the characters' journeys, as well as the emotional heights for the career of Sammy as a filmmaker, given that those were beats in the film that clicked with me personally, and for difficulties I've had as a filmmaker myself, and getting to see him overcome that massive hurdle is just such a momentous and awe-inspiring moment. This film really rewards you upon rewatch as well, because back at the beginning, when you don't really know how these characters evolve, their choices make much less sense, but suddenly going back throughout the film and knowing how the characters evolve from their start, this garners a greater understanding from you, and that's where those character choices that made little sense beforehand all of a sudden can be much more understood. It still didn't stop me from being invested in the film from beginning to end, and we're talking about on an emotional scale. My eyes were virtually glued to the screen. I didn't even care that I knew how it ended. Obviously Fabelman would get into Hollywood come the end of the film, just as Spielberg did. Otherwise, this film simply wouldn't exist if Spielberg never got into Hollywood even. My apologies for stutter, but I wanted so desperately for these characters to reach those aspirations and to grow closer as a family that I cared for every single beat of the story as it played out along the way. It was the journey that truly captivated me here, and not just the destination, hence my investment in the film. You feel the same sense of victory as Sammy does when he gets to Hollywood at the end. Walking through the studios, having reached his dream, he's humbled and captivated by it. Since you've been invested in his character throughout, this is why you feel the same sense of awe as he does. Once again, you couldn't be as captivated by this film and these characters without the spectacular performances. Everyone here is passionate about the script and performing at their absolute best to ensure that these characters have those layers and depth to them, that's complexity that you rarely see in films. The actors have real chemistry and you truly feel that family dynamic between them. The visuals in the film are spectacular. There is a style to the cinematography as you can both be thrown into the camera style for Sammy Fabelman, but the wide angles regularly used are showing Sammy as a filmmaker. It feels almost like a behind-the-scenes featurette, and it's great to teach those who don't know enough about filmmaking what it looks like to make films, and it gives filmmakers themselves who know what's going on and know how the visual illusions are being crafted something to recognise within the film. It creates a tethering point through understanding, so filmmakers themselves fall in love with what they see on screen. Each shot means something. Techniques such as rule of thirds and framing are used to visually represent character dynamics and relationships, and its subtleties in the camera work, which I deeply admire because it also gives the film those additional layers. Relationships meant to be hidden are seen far off into the corner of the frame. In fact, you don't even see them in the initial camping sequence, but then Sammy goes to make the film about the camping sequence in order to cheer his mother up after she loses her own mother, that is. But you discover a secret alongside Sammy that her mother's been cheating on the father, and your heart is broken alongside his. The conflict is boiling up and you're left with dread about when it might be revealed and how it might break up the compelling family dynamic you've grown to care so much about. But overall, the cinematography is thought through and captivating, given a mix of seeing the external struggles making film and what goes on behind the camera, as well as getting to see the power and influence of film through Sammy's perspective, so you can ultimately understand visually the passion riled up inside of him. The music and the sound elevate the film as well, really creating that need for the cinematic experience, which is why I recommend watching the Fabelmans in a theatre if you can. John Williams' score is always spectacular, and it really adds to the emotional beats as your brain starts associating certain sounds with certain emotions. It almost feels involuntary when the sad beats come into the film, because you hear that familiar sad music, you wind up just naturally being sad because of it. But I found myself just as emotionally resonant with the highlights of the film. I cried at the motion of the family being incredibly happy on holiday. Seeing their strong bonds with one another and their escapism from the world was so positive for me that I cried at the motion of feeling so happy and free alongside them. This film captures both extreme sides to the emotional spectrum so that the film can become incredibly memorable alongside the personal investment you feel for the film. The sound is excellent, capturing the subtleties of things like the projector rolling or food being gathered up on a disposable tablecloth. You truly hear everything that's going on in the frame, which pulls you into the film even further. And the audio mixing makes it so dialogue or important sound effects are never overshadowed, and in the cinema you felt the loud booms when explosions, crash cuts or vehicles raced by. This gave me goosebumps, as the sound being this powerful carries through your entire body. It's some of the best sound I've heard, and I know the sound equipment being held behind the scenes, and I really respect the crew for crafting it. It would be several dozens of people who again can really connect and invest into this project as they themselves are filmmakers, making the very film you see before you. It's effectively a full loop, which is just plain clever filmmaking if we're being perfectly honest here. In conclusion, this film has already become incredibly important. This will become one of those films you need to see before you die, mark my words. It tackles the deep and investing themes of pursuing filmmaking as a career and how that breaks your heart and it risks taking over all other aspects of your life. The characters are so well written. Sammy isn't the perfect protagonist, and he's called out for his selfishness, which is how real human beings act, so you invest into them because of the illusion that everything you see is completely real. And yet still, Sammy is an incredibly captivating main protagonist that you really want to see his goals and aspirations fulfilled upon. This, brought about through the excellent sound and cinematography, will give you a glimpse into the filmmaking business so you can learn or point out things you understand already. It gives you a means to really emotionally invest into this film, and I connected to everything I saw on a personal scale unlike any other film. I laughed and cried. The roller coaster of emotions was so damn memorable to me that it left a lasting impact long after the credits rolled, and I love a film having that impact, and this film's message is incredibly empowering, to say the least. Spielberg directed this with passion, as it shows through in every single scene where his personal touch can be felt. Truly, no other director could have made this. I'm really rooting for this film at the Oscars, but for now, it remains as my film of the month for January 2023. And that is still when it's going against two other very compelling and worthy adversaries. I was very close to putting Tar here instead, and even Megan had a good shot at the title, but in the end, the Fabelmans prevails for being a film which I myself, it's hard to explain and put into words just the raw emotion I felt behind this one, but this here is my personal decision to make, and that's why, the most important factor of all, the personal flair, that's where this film comes in for me, and it's easily my favourite film of January 2023. In fact, if any film comes out this year that comes remotely close to the Fabelmans in terms of just raw emotion and power behind it, then I will be shocked, because we have one hell of a year for films to come. And just like that, the review is over and my face is back. Now, the Oscar nominations video, I'm leaving it until next week because I still have a couple more of nominations to catch up upon. I need to watch Banshees of Inisherin. I'm actually watching The Whale after I'm done editing this video. And then I'm also watching All Quiet on the Western Front and Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio, both of which I found on Netflix. I'm really looking forward to those. I've heard very good things. It's honestly a shock I haven't gotten around to watching them yet. So as soon as I've watched them, I will write the Oscar nominations video, and that will release next Friday alongside my updated MCU ranking, because next Friday marks the release for Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, one of my most anticipated films of the year, so needless to say I'm getting quite chitty just talking about it. So that's what I have to look forward to next Film Fridays. Finally, that Oscars video will release, and I'll have an updated MCU ranking. I cannot, in good conscience, end off this video without first thanking all of my incredible channel members whose continued support help make these videos possible. Without them, these videos would be near impossible to make, so from the bottom of my heart, I truly appreciate every last one of them. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more, there are plenty of options on screen now to explore, and please consider subscribing to keep up to date with all my content. On that note, this video is coming to an end, so thank you so much as always for watching. Until the next video arises, peace!